Welcome, welcome, and good morning, Grand Rising. This is Cut to the Chase. My name is Sylvester Rivers, and I'm with you every Friday morning at 8 a.m., bringing you information that hopefully is informative and will shed light on what's going on. The interview you're about to hear was previously heard on KPFK. I'm bringing it up now because it's appropriate to what's going on in the world, especially these wars. I felt this was an excellent interview. At one point, I teared up because of what Lorenzo was saying. My guests for this interview are Jonina Abram. She was the editor of the Black Panther newspaper. And Lorenzo Gamboa Irvin. Lorenzo, he got drafted and he decided, I'm not going to Vietnam. You're not sending me over there. So we see this in parallel to what's happening today, where they're sending all these young men to Iran. I don't know what they're going to do. They might just bring them right back. Who knows? But he realized that this was not his war. Hopefully the troops that are going to Iran will realize this is not their war, and they need not be killing people for it. So stay tuned for this interview with Jonina Abram and Lorenzo Gamboa Irvin.
In my case, I had been put in the military in just, I was too young. I was underage. I was still in high school, and they just took me anyway. And that's what they were doing in the South. They would take young black men who had basically no education or little education or was in high school. It didn't make a difference. They were looking for cannon fodder, and they sent them to the military, and they sent them to Vietnam. Well, in my case, I didn't go to Vietnam right away, but the plans were that all of us would have gone to Vietnam. You know, everyone had been, close to 1 million soldiers that would have been possibly sent to Vietnam. I think that at one point they only had maybe 300,000 at the high stage, but they had planned to just overwhelm the Vietnamese resistance, as well as the movements for resistance in other countries around it, in Thailand and other places, Cambodia. So they were going to have upwards of 1 million men and numerous military equipment, and that was the plan. And by us resisting, we shook up their whole system. So I was going to be the scapegoat, primarily, who, I was the only one who really caught as the main leadership. And I was going to be a scapegoat. And but what happened is, like I said, the publicity on the riot that took place in Mannheim prison, stockade, had spread all over the world. And there were a number of other riots that took place even after I left, and so they never had ever effectively gained control of that place to send all the troops in the United States military at that time, sent all up to Vietnam and just overwhelm that area. They never got the opportunity to do that. So they hated my guts. And they wanted to at least give me an undesirable discharge, at least do that. So I wouldn't be able to find any work or get any benefits, anything, I'd just be a ghost in the system.
So you were released. What year were you released?
67. I came back home. See,
when did y'all met? So did you become a Panther too?
Well, she was married. She was married to another brother who was he was a Black Panther. So I didn't meet her till years and years later.
Let's swap over to you now. So now you're in the Panthers.
Right.
You join.
Just to briefly, it's, Lorenzo actually, and I have an interesting history, because the first contact that we actually had was in 1978, when he was locked up in prison. He was, doing a life sentence for hijacking the plane to Cuba. And he had written a letter to the Black Panther newspaper editor about the conditions that were going on, in prison. And I was the editor at the time. And so he told me years later, of course, when he said I actually answered the letter. And we found a sister who's a historian of the Black Panther Party. She found the letter from the 1978 issue. We published it that he had written to the newspaper. So that was our first contact. We didn't actually physically meet, actually, but then we later, in the early mid 1990s.
Well, you go hijacked the plane in 78.
So I hijacked the plane in '69 and was I was arrested later on that year in 1969, brought back to the United States, and I was on trial for the death penalty. At that time, hijack a plane was a crime for which you could be sentenced, to lose your life. And so they brought me back, and they had me in New York, because they brought me to Germany, and they had me in New York. And while I was there, I met Martin Sostry, who was a jailhouse lawyer, as well as someone who was suing the New York State federal prison, the New York State prison system. And having met him, he helped me avoid the death penalty portion of my case, because they could sentence you to death even if you didn't kill anyone, even if you didn't physically harm anybody. They could sentence you to death. They had the ability to do it. The charge ran 20 years to death. If they decided they wanted to give you a death penalty, you would get it, and they would be in the clear legally. So he pointed out that, first of all, when you were captured in Germany, you weren't lawfully arrested. The State Department is who sent agents to get me, and they are not, law enforcement agents. So effectively, they kidnapped me, and they took me out of a country that was hostile to the United States, who had given me asylum, and and had covertly sent me across the border, the 3K zone they call it, in East Berlin, and in West Berlin, and brought me to the American consulate, and American consulate is surrounded by a military base where the main offices of the military intelligence agency is located. And so I'm there, and I'm effectively being tortured to information for a week. And eventually the FBI sent notice over to him and said, why isn't this guy back here? You guys have got him, right? Why is he back in our custody? What's going on, So the FBI never came abroad to arrest me. The people who came and got me were from a nebulous agency, part of the Department of State. They called it the Bureau of National Resources. It's just nebulous. It's a covert agency. And that's who they sent to get me and bring me back, and they brought me back illegally. And so when I got back to the United States, Martin Sostry, who I met in the prison, said that you can get out of the death penalty portion of your case because of the irregularities that the government resorted to bring you back to the United States. So I don't know about getting you out of the whole case. He said, but we can defeat the death penalty portion now. And so he set it up so I go to court, and when I'm there, the judge gets ready to speak. I jump up and I said that I've been kidnapped, I've been beaten and tortured, and I'm going to tell the world about it. And the judge said, wait a minute, what's going on here? What's going on? I kept talking. And finally, he was smart enough to move me into his room, his chambers. And we sat there and we talking, and I told him all about it. I said, I'm going to tell the world about it. I got it in legal writing right here. So I'm going to put it before the world, let them know that you kidnapped me. We're right near the United Nations, and I'm making a plea to the United Nations to save me from being executed by a racist government. They kidnapped me from a country in East Germany. Of course, East Germany was a common state. And when they found out about it, they were making a complaint themselves. And so what they had to do, they made the deal that they were not going to charge me with the death penalty portion of this case. Now, I didn't get out of the case. I had to go back and fight the case in Georgia and all this stuff. But they weren't putting me on trial for my life. And it made a big difference, and that was one of the things I won in New York. And so this, was just like, I was in prison for 15 years. And this was part of the whole thing of me, going to Cuba and asking for a little bit of asylum, hijacking a plane and all the stuff that happened to me in Tennessee, where, a Ku Klux Klan leader, an attorney, who was responsible for the bombing of the church at Birmingham, who was responsible for bombings all over the South. And he planned it, and then he would go and get these people out of jail, representing them in court. So, I was making an attempt on his life. And this...
They claim.
Yeah, they claim. I'm not pleading guilty to anything. But, they claim that I'd gotten some explosives and was going to, plant bombs to kill this person. And, well, the incident didn't happen. Because I was running, they were on my tail by then, and they were running me out of town, and then the case blew up. And I had to go on the run, and I went to Cuba and asked for political asylum. I got to Cuba, and because of a number of things happening down there, I had to leave there, and they sent me to East Germany. Well, they sent me directly to Czechoslovakia, and then I went to East Germany. And saw the Panthers who had hijacked planes and stuff over in Cuba and other countries I ran across. I was only running for about a year, and eventually I was captured. And while I was in Czechoslovakia, I escaped from there and that's when I went to East Germany. And I had plans to make it as far as Africa, I had a possibility of getting asylum in Africa. And unfortunately, before that could happen, and that's when I was arrested, or so-called arrested, I was just kidnapped and brought across the lines from East Germany into West Germany. And arriving in West Germany, I was immediately beset upon by agents of the United States.
And then you started your sentencing term.
Well, I eventually received 2 life sentences for that possibility of parole. And that was in lieu of me being sentenced to death. Now, that's a harsh enough sentence for somebody that, is 21 years old. You're looking at spending the rest of your life in prison with the prospect that you wouldn't even live through your term. They had racists trying to kill me and all this kind of stuff. In the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, when I arrived there, I was told that by guards. A black guard said, "Listen, somebody has hired somebody to kill you in here. And they don't want you to be able to tell anybody anything, and they don't want you to be able to ever live to get out, And so that was the case. But there were people there who had heard about my case, black people, even white people, that knew it was a railroading. I didn't receive a fair trial. I had a Ku Klux Klan jury, essentially. And these people decided that they would help me. So when I would go to, around the prison, walk around the prison or whatever, and they knew about this stuff, they had somebody with me all the time. So whoever this person was that they claimed was going to come in and kill me or whatever, harm me, couldn't get to me, I had all sorts of people around me, and eventually, so what the officials decided to do, they decided to send me to the prison in Terre Haute, Indiana. I had been in the Black Panther Party from the time that I got out of the Army. And for 2 years, 67 to '69, was it?
Yeah, the Black Panther Party, Lorenzo was in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, and for a while, SNCC and the Black Panther Party had a brief merger. They joined together, yeah. And so he was working with SNCC in Atlanta, and so a lot of the people in SNCC became part of the Black Panther Party.
In fact, the leadership
Yeah.
of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was drafted into by Huey P. Newton and the leadership of the Black Panther Party. SNCC was a older organization. It had been involved in the Black Power movement. It was one of the instrumental organizations that created the Black Power movement. And, it also had trained organizers in communities all over the South and eventually all over the country. So they wanted to unite with them. They had great respect for them at this particular time. And so the leadership was brought in. The FBI knew about this and was greatly concerned. And so what they did is they started their first Black COINTELPRO to break up the alliance between the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Black Panther Party. Now, that's not to say that there were not political and maybe even personal differences that came about and all that kind of stuff later, but the real line, we're talking about timeline of 67 through 69. And that's when the leaders of the Black Panther Party and the leaders of SNCC were merged in one organization, essentially. And also key activists went into the Black Panther Party, key activists and others, who were sympathetic to the Black Panther Party than they were to SNCC. SNCC was truthfully folding at this time. They were losing their reason for the work they were doing. They had splits. They had political differences in the leadership and all this kind of stuff. And they wouldn't, most people believe that they wouldn't have survived through that period if they had not worked with the Black Panther Party. And eventually they did fold anyway. But the most important thing of what I'm saying is the FBI knew who people were that were doing this. They were scared of that. They thought that this would make this young organization that had only been founded in '66 become a mass movement and would be unstoppable. And so the counterintelligence program, was designed around this first one, at least, was designed around breaking up the merger between SNCC and the Black Panther Party. They saw what the leadership of the Black Panther Party saw, that there were people there who were tremendous organizers, who had been trained as organizers and who worked as organizers for years, and would make capable organizers inside of the Black Panther Party. And the leadership, the leadership they had gotten at that time was a different leadership that started in '60. This was a leadership that were more revolutionary. They weren't trying to just reform the system; they were trying to overthrow the state. And Soper Carmichael, and that's what he called
H.Rap Brown, they were drafted into the Black Panther.
And James Foreman as well.
James Foreman,
who was also an important leader, and he himself was a socialist, and was responsible for a lot of socialist leanings inside the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee that didn't exist otherwise. Now, a lot of this stuff is disputed, and I won't claim that I know it all, and I just know some things. But the point is that this laid the door open for myself and others to join the Black Panther Party, to go into the Black Panther Party. And unfortunately, in my case, since in the South, and I was from Tennessee, I was living in Tennessee, there was no chapters in the South at that time. This only came later, and you're talking about by '67, this group was only 1 year old, or something like that, and had gone from the phase of being the Black Panther Party for self-defense to being the Black Panther Party. And there was an important distinction there in that instead of just engaging in armed self-defense or even armed conflicts with the police or with racists or whatever. They instead were building a political party for power among the people to transform their communities, and to also engage in armed self-defense, when they were attacked. This laid the basis to be a mass organization. What year did you notice that the Black Panther Party?
Well, I started hearing about the Black Panther Party in the late 1960s. I guess the first time I heard about the Black Panther Party, though, I was coming to the end of my freshman year in college. This was like the spring of 1967, and I was watching the news, and they showed the Black Panthers, marching to the state legislature in California, in Sacramento, protesting this law to, at that point, you were able to carry a loaded weapon. It was legal to carry a loaded gun, but the law enforcement in California got tired of the Panthers doing that because they were threatened by that, So they said, we're going to pass a law to end it. And the Black Panthers, Bobby Seale and other Black Panthers, went to Sacramento to protest that, just went into the legislature. And I was watching that on the news. And I was, like I said, I was, at that point, not quite 19 years old, and saw this. And, I'm going to be honest about it, my initial thing was like, these Black people are crazy. They're marching into a state government office with guns and everything. They're not going to get away with this. And but then I began to learn more about the Black Panther Party and the breakfast program and the other programs. And I realized, well, I want to be part of something like this. So my initial thing of thinking they're crazy, I became a member.
But the point is that the publicity over the march at the California state legislature spread all over the country, in fact, spread all over the world. And people who were made conscious of there being a new Black revolutionary movement that had never even thought about the idea, and so that's the period. That period is when you could say it came from being, a local organization, or it just was, a few activists and so forth, and it became a nationwide organization.
I had the privilege of interviewing Bobby Seale back in the day, and he was telling me that Ronald Reagan, who was the governor of California at the time, was out on the yard in Sacramento with some children, and the children happened to see those Panthers with the guns, and they were excited. Oh, there's Black people with the guns. And after that, the laws were changed, so there's no open carry of guns.
But a lot of people that came out of the military joined the Black Panther Party. Some of the main leadership, and you were talking about people here in Los Angeles, Geronimo Pratt is an example, of some of the actors and leaders that came out of the military and had learned, military tactics, and came and joined the Black Panther Party and were able to give instruction on self-defense efforts and arms and the ability to fight off the police and all these sort of things. This is extremely potent information, and the FBI, which was the primary agency that led a campaign to monitor and destroy the Black Panther Party, with the COINTELPRO program, but also a lot of people don't know that the CIA had a program called Operation Chaos, and Operation Chaos was designed to use international programs to monitor leaders of the Black Panther Party and other groups, and not just the Black Panther Party. They spied heavily on H. Rap Brown and at that time he was known as Stokely Carmichael. They spied on them.
Carmichael and H. Rap Brown.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying at that time he was Stokely Carmichael.
Yeah, he was.
That was H. Rap Brown is in prison again now.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Did he ever get out?
I know he was out. Then now.
Yeah, I remember.
Been in the years.
Yeah, well, he's in prison on another frame-up case. It's interesting that before this current charge, they had charged him with what they called having a shootout with some street gangsters, and they put him in prison. But we defeated the charge. The old activists in Atlanta that had been a snake and other people built a mass movement, and we actually defeated the charges. And so the other charges came later, and that's a whole different thing. The people who had been supporting him, they were pushed to the side. The Muslims that represented his campaign and all this, that they didn't want any reference to him as H. Rap Brown and all this kind of thing. And that was a self-defeating strategy because, we had already proven that he was being framed. And to try to make it out that he's just an imam and they're after him and so forth. It was, everybody in the white community is not sympathetic towards Islam. I mean, there's a large base that is, but a lot of people aren't. And if you cut those people out, people who remember him as a revolutionary, cut those people out of your defense campaign, you weaken it. This is my opinion, and others have talked about this as well.
Let's pivot over to you, Jonina. How did you get involved, or how did you become the editor of the Black Panther paper?
Well, in the Detroit chapter, at some point they had called most of the chapters in the country to all come to Oakland because they wanted Oakland to become the party's base of operation. And so we went to Oakland in early 1974, and I joined the newspaper staff. I had studied journalism when I was in college, so they put me, on the newspaper staff. And then in so this was early 74 when we got there. And then in 78, I became the editor of the paper. The brother who had been the editor, he resigned from the party. He left the party, so I guess I was next in line, so I became the editor of the paper.
The Black Panther paper lasted for some time. When did it get started, and how long did it run?
The first issue was published in '67, and the last issue was published in 1980, September 1980. So that was 13 years, yeah.
And what was your recollection? What do you see? What did you write about? What stands out?
Well, we covered we covered stuff that was happening in Oakland, of course, but the different chapters and branches of the party, they would send us news from their cities. So we were getting news from all around the country. And we also had a section of the paper where we would deal with international news in different countries, a little that we thought would be of interest to oppressed people. And so we had the international section that would include what was from Africa, the Caribbean, Asia. We had a lot of reporting about the Vietnam War in the newspaper. So we had a regular column that dealt with the prison movement, or we called it Behind the Walls, and people who were locked up. They would send us letters, published in the paper about what was going. They would write us what was happening in their prison and their struggle, and we would cover any kind of events that we thought had some impact on people of color, Black people, poor people. So it was a very wide variety of topics that we talked about.
It was 25 cents.
It was 25 cents. This is one of my favorite stories about the Black Panthers newspaper. It was a powerful paper. One time, I believe I was in Oakland, I was selling the paper. So a brother gave me a quarter for it, and I was going to hand in this paper. And he said, "No, man," he said, "I don't know how to read. I can't read it. So you just keep the paper and you give it to somebody who can read." But even though he couldn't read it, he knew how powerful it was. I mean, that blew my mind.
He knew how powerful it was, also the government. So what did they do to curtail, or did they curtail the distribution of the paper?
Yeah, that was one of the campaigns that the of the FBI counterintelligence program. They did a number of things. One thing that they would do is that they would do whatever they could to disrupt. We would ship papers to different cities in the country. So when they got to different airports, they would confiscate the papers, or in some cases they broke into a warehouse where they were stored and doused them in water, and things like that to try to actually destroy the publication itself. So yeah, they were very intent on paper not getting the word out. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover, who was the director of the FBI back in those days, he felt like the Black Panther newspaper was extremely dangerous because of what it was reporting. He knew that it was reporting. He felt like the Black Panther Party's free breakfast program for children. He said that was the single most dangerous program we had because Hoover was a racist, but he wasn't stupid. He understood what it meant for us to be feeding breakfast to poor children. He understood the power of that program, and that helped us get a lot of support. Everybody in the Black community was not necessarily involved, wasn't into the armed self-defense part. When we started serving kids free breakfast, and we started free food program, and we had these other community-based programs, that's when our support grew, because we were dealing with the concrete, everyday material needs of people. And when you serve people food, the breakfast program, what it did was it showed about the poverty and hunger in the United States. They shined a new light on that. The fact that a lot of kids would go to school every day on an empty stomach.
You also had a free clinic program.
That's right. We had a free clinic program, healthcare. We were able to recruit some doctors to help us and some other health professionals that would help us. We were able to offer some free services. We drew national attention to sickle cell anemia, which had been ignored by the federal health services. Black Panther Party started the first national pre-testing for sickle cell anemia in the United States. And we said, well, no, this is not being done because it primarily affects people of color and Black people. We started a program on the sickle cell anemia test. It was things like this that really got us the support from the community because we were dealing with their everyday needs.
So interesting. So you said Hoover said that the breakfast program was a threat. Well, if so, it seems like you're saying that he felt that if the Black Panthers were self-contained and could take care of themselves, were socialized for self, then that's a threat.
But even more, it was the whole issue of if the government would not or could not feed children, then or give them programs or for school where they could have food, then what's their justification? Here's a small organization, no more than 5,000 members nationwide, that's feeding children all over the country, Black kids in the ghetto all over the country, and the government is not giving them anything. So it became a contradiction and a source of complaints against the federal government for their refusal to create a breakfast for children program. And this is the reason why he felt. One of the reasons why he felt is the fact the very example of children being fed and it being broadcast all over nationwide TV, and the federal government they had all the resources, but they wouldn't use those resources for Black kids in the community.
So just the optics, it seems, created a threat. Before we pivot to current situations, what might stand out in your mind that you experienced from the stories you told us, some of the things that affected you, besides the story about the man who gave you 25 cents for the paper and couldn't read?
Well, I was the editor of the paper when the situation developed, you remember, down in Jonestown in Guyana. And the Black Panther Party had a close relationship with the People's Temple in San Francisco because, they had community programs and we held some similar beliefs and everything. I knew I had a friend who was in People's Temple And at some point they decided People's Temple, which was a largely black organization, they decided that they were going to go to Guyana and just leave the United States. And see, in the Black Panther Party, we viewed that as a major statement to say, well, we feel like we can't live, these people, poor people can't live in dignity and respect in the United States, so then we're going to go to another country. And we thought, wow, this is a tremendous political statement that they were making. And so, like I said, we knew them, we knew a lot of them. And then, of course, I worked on, once the whole thing had come up, had developed about the so-called massacre, but that stories had begun to develop about what was going on.
Could you bring our audience up to par in case they don't know about what happened in Guyana regarding that Jim Jones incident?
Okay, yes. So in November, I believe it was November of 1978, somewhere around there, the news developed that over 900 people, the bodies of over 900 people who had been in the Jonestown settlement in Guyana were found. They were dead. And people thought it was a, mass suicide or whatever. We may never know what really happened there. Some say it was a mass suicide, that the leader, Jim Jones, had brainwashed the people and getting them to drink a drink that would cause them to commit suicide. Because there had been stories developing about problems in Jonestown, the government had started looking into it. A congressman had come down to investigate, so they were getting attention from the federal government. And actually, I believe the congressman was actually killed at the point they were trying to leave, and there was some kind of a shootout down there. Like I said, we don't ever know what all the real details were, but he was killed, and I believe a news person was killed, and all these kind of things. As those headlines developed, and then soon after that, the bodies of these over 900 people were found. And in the Black Panther Party, we thought that somehow the government had been responsible for killing all these people. And, I don't necessarily believe that today. I think that there were problems with the leadership, Jim Jones, and, I don't know how anyone can get people in that number to commit suicide, to drink something like that. But like I said, I don't still know the true story. But at any rate, this all came out of the news, and that was probably a story that had a lot of impact on me, because we did a lot of digging. We were able to interview family members who had not gone to Jonestown, and to get information about what was going on down there. So I think that really impacted me, because it was like, here were some people who had decided, we're leaving the United States. We're poor people. We're mostly people of color. We're not getting treated right. We're leaving. We're going someplace else. And then this is what happened. So that really, had quite an impact.
So what you're saying is not cut and dry. You might think there's some other type of hanky-panky that went on, because you have all these 900 mostly black people all of a sudden become dying. So those thoughts went through your mind. Is that what you?
Well,
A lot of people.
Yeah, to a lot of people, I was thought that probably may have been killed by the government. Part of our research, we found out that somebody who was in Jonestown, that's probably one of the maybe a supervisor or something, had in fact at one point been in the CIA. That came out in the mainstream press, right? So we said, well, hey, who knows what they did? So I felt like that they may have been destroyed because of the political statement that they made. Okay. I'm not sure now. I mean, we'll never know. But
It seems like you were more sure then than now. Why is that?
It's a good question. Maybe because I talked to more people later on who had family members there who, had more information about what was going on, made me think, well, maybe somehow they were brainwashed. I still, I'm not as totally convinced as I was but the fact that the government sent a congressman down there to investigate them, we know they were under investigation by the federal government. So we know that in and of itself was shaky, the fact that they were. So it's not that I don't think the government didn't have any role at all in the destruction. I guess I'm just not sure exactly, everything that happened. But we were convinced at the time that the government was behind it. We said so in the Black Panther newspaper.
Well, there's an old saying we have that says, always follow your first mind.
I know. And I can't tell you at what point. Maybe somebody told me later or something, but it's so long ago now. This was 1978. But at least at the time, it impacted me because I felt like this is what the federal government will do when Americans leave the country and go someplace else. And I thought,
Make a statement out of it.
they did make a statement. No question. They made a statement. There's absolutely no question about that.
Well, one thing, I don't necessarily have the same belief. I know people that killed, 900 people that killed themselves, but I also know that one of the main military bases in, the Caribbean, well, the military, the United States military, and for its special operations, was not that far away from Guyana. And it would have been a real simple matter for them to just, deploy some kind of nerve gas. I was in the military and I know that they had it. I've seen the use of it, the training of it, and it would have been very simple to have done that. And in that standpoint, I believe it was eminently possible to have used a nerve agent, that the United States government would have used a nerve agent in a country, outside of the jurisdiction of the United States. People wouldn't know about it. The American media wouldn't know anything about it. But what the American government was doing, they were overthrowing countries. They established a military base in Cuba that still exists right now. So.
And just to clarify, in fact, this nerve gas, if he's talking about, that's what we said, that's what we published in the Black Panther newspaper, in the editorial, getting our opinion. In fact, I wrote that editorial. That's what we said, that we believe that they were killed by nerve gas. I can't remember the name of it. I know I had a conversation, on the phone with Huey Newton about this, and I think, but I can't remember the name of it, but that's what we said. This was our conclusion, that they were killed by a nerve gas, that our understanding of this particular nerve gas, it wouldn't leave any traces.
Right.
It might look like it was poison Kool-Aid or whatever.
Well, they had Agent Blue, Agent Orange, and several hundred other, toxic chemicals that they could use. Some of them were undetectable, and especially would be undetectable in a tropical environment. And over the course of time, the people were dead, and they could have been that dead a week and nobody would have known, and the effects of the drug would have passed away, out of their bodies. And we know that the government has done stuff like this. They did it in Vietnam.
Yeah.
They did it.
Agent Orange.
Yeah. Well, Agent Blue as well, and others that people haven't even heard of were used. And I know when I was in the military, one of the jobs I had was working in a place that had all this stuff. And it was killing GIs and other people who were handling it, as well as the so-called enemy. And I was lucky to get out of there alive. To be quite honest. They intended, in my case for sure, just have me in there get killed. They'd be one of the people that just died in the course of their job, and that's been aimed at it, And so I knew the cable. That was not a crazy thing to think back then. Back then or now. Or now.
Or now, right.
I'm going to take us to the prison movement, which was an important part of the struggle inside the Black Panther Party. One of the leaders, George Jackson, was in prison, had met Huey T. Newton, and also Geronimo Pratt had met Huey T. Newton in the prison system. And there also was widespread support for the prison struggle in the Black community as a whole, but certainly in the Black Panther Party and other organizations like it. And so that when George Jackson was assassinated in 1871,
71, yeah, yes, ma'am.
and he was assassinated in August of 71, and the Attica Rebellion rose up in September 1971, and those two events touched off a worldwide protest movement. And the international protest committees and everything that came about in support of the African prisoners and of the assassination of the protest assassination of George Jackson, and the fact that so many black prisoners were in the prison system and were being brutalized, and the prisoners themselves had become politicized by 1971, actually by 1970, in 69 and 70, when I went into the prison system. Prisoners had been radicalized. That's why I said so many knew about my case when I came to the prison system and saw me as a political prisoner, and the fact that I had been able to defeat the federal government's attempt to execute me, I told you about in New York. By the time I got to Georgia, and that's where the case was going to be held, prosecutors in Georgia, in a small racist town in Georgia. And, I was thrown into the prison system. So, literally given a 2 or 3 day trial for my life before an all-white jury of rednecks, all-white jury in Newnan, Georgia. And they didn't even want to prosecute me in Atlanta because black people would be able to get on the jury. So they sent me to this racist hellhole. That's what the guards call it. That's what the U.S. Marshals call it, a racist hellhole. And so I was sent there, and I was supposed to die right there. I was supposed to be sentenced to death. And they couldn't sentence me to death, so they sentenced me to 2 life sentences without possibility of appellate. And they sent me to the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. And that's where I was supposed to live and die. But the struggle had reached the extent that large numbers of black prisoners had become radical. Even many whites had become radical. They turned against the Ku Klux Klan in the prison in Indiana. And we organized an anti-Klan rebellion. Now the guards were openly racist, and they were actually having the prisoners, white racist prisoners, attack blacks. And they would let them go. They wouldn't charge them with anything. If somebody was killed, they just take the body out and that'd be it. And so when I came there, it was actually a number of us came, young black people. And we were influenced by the Black Power movement, Black Panther Party, all these things that was happening in that period, 68, 69, and 70s, and so we met inside the prison. We formed an organization inside the prison, and we were able to ride the wave from the Attica Rebellion to reach out to prisoners all over the country that were forming this mass movement. And we were also able to reach people in the communities, especially students at white colleges, but black colleges as well. And we were able to some of the worst abuses that had taken place in these prisons, including, like I said, the Klan and the Klan Rebellion, anti-Klan rebellion in Terre Haute, Indiana, in 69, 70. And that place, Terre Haute, Indiana, historically has been the base of operations for the National Ku Klux Klans back in the 1920s. That was their headquarters. It's always been a racist place. The Klan elected the governor, and the Klan elected the mayor of the city of Terre Haute. It's always been a racist place. And so when I got there, and then others came around the same time I did, we weren't going for all this turning another cheek and let somebody beat you in the head and kill you, this kind of stuff that was going on there. And we created some unity with the brothers. With this organization we had built, this African American Cultural Studies program, and We also had hooked up with some of the whites were anti-racist. They came out of New York and other places like that. They weren't down with no redneck stuff. They weren't intimidated by these fascists. So they refused to work with them, and they couldn't be intimidated. And then other ethnic groups. You had a large number of Mexicans and Puerto Ricans, and they were from cities. They weren't from some point out in the country. And so we were able to bring together a mass movement right under the noses of the warden and other government officials, as well as the prison guards and the prison guards union. And we created a movement that one day there was an atrocity against one of our brothers, and we rose up in rebellion and took over the prison. And what they used to do is to depend on white people to help the guards break it up. What happened is that the white people that we work with, because we've been given them books to read and on Black history and the revolutionary politics and all this stuff, they turned against the Klan and the wardens and all these persons that had doomed us to die or to be suffering and all this sort of thing. We were able to rise up and overthrow that. And of course, I suffered personally, from that, because they considered, the prison officials considered me the leader of the so-called riot. And I was stuck in solitary confinement. They stuck a bunch of us in solitary confinement. They shipped the others off. They kept me there to torture me and so forth. And I was beaten unmercifully to the point that all the skin on my head and the hair and everything was peeled off with chemical mace, because of so much chemical mace being sprayed on my face, and so many beatings and stuff, while I was handcuffed and all this sort of thing. So, but eventually, before I could be killed, the prisoners said that if you don't release him, if you don't get him out of this prison alive and send him for medical care, we're going to burn this prison to the ground. And it scared them. It scared them. It really did scare them. They didn't know what to do. And they had a strike was going on at the time anyway, so they didn't know what to do. So they shipped me out of there. And they sent me to Terre Haute, Indiana. And I was just one of a number of prisoners that they sent to this facility, behavior modification facility, in Missouri, Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah, I was going to say you went from Terre Haute to Springfield.
Yeah. But like I said, these strikes and protests were happening all over the country as a result of the Attica Rebellion and the assassination of George Jackson. That's my point. And also the prison movement was coming together, both on the inside and the outside, and becoming a powerful movement. And so they had people willing to go and protest and march around the prison facilities and other things, to risk their lives to, on behalf of the prisoners. And they weren't used to that. That terrified them, in fact. And one of the things that was used to get me out of Terre Haute was a mass protest at the prison. And finally they came and got me and sent me to Springfield. And Springfield at that time was doing all this stuff with a program of behavior modification. They were torturing people, forcing them to take drugs and all this kind of stuff. We were able to get word out about it to the outside, and the news media, the national news media, like Time Magazine and Newsweek and others, as well as the ABC News and all, they started broadcasting things about it, because what it amounted to was what they were doing in prison was torture. The same kind of torture that they had been using in Vietnam. And so this publicity got outside, and then lawsuits were being filed as well. And in my case, I got out before some of the other brothers did, and I started, keeping my promise to send information out to, activists as well as newspapers and other sources. Now, there was a book published that has a lot of the stuff I gave to the author. The book is called Kind and Usual Punishment. It's out of print now, but Kind and Usual Kind and Usual Punishment. And it was written by Jessica Mitford, and she won the National Book Award because of that particular book expose. There was, in the 1970s, the prison movement was probably one of the most important movements in the United States. The late 1960s and certainly into the 1970s, early 1970s. It was one of the most important issues. It had millions of people rethinking what they thought they knew about prisons. It's like the sister was saying she went into prison for the first time and saw what it was really like. Well, there were people who saw what kinds of crimes the government and the prison guards themselves commit in the name of law and order, or in the name of social control, or whatever the name is they use to justify this. They do the same thing in the street today. But the prison movement had, people like George Jackson and the leaders of the Attica Rebellion in New York were extremely articulate, able to explain what it was like to have to live under the butchery and the terrorism of racists every day, 24 hours a day, spit in your food, roll their nose in your food, do anything just to provoke you, beat you unmercifully, handcuff you, beat you. These kinds of things went on every day. And so the prisoners it got to a stage where when George Jackson was killed, and George Jackson had become probably seen as the national leader of the prison movement. When George Jackson was assassinated, that helped provoke, in the next month, to September, they helped to provoke the rebellion by the prisoners in Attica. And this was not just a prison rebellion where they started doing something and they fell apart. These were men who knew they were going to die, who had the prospect of dying. And they wanted to be able to tell the world, we are men. We are not animals. And we will not be treated as such. If we die today, we die as full human beings, standing up against oppression. There is a special person throughout all this, George Jackson, in the California prison system. And when he came up, there was very little outside support, maybe here in California, but not nationwide. He was highly respected by other prisoners. I was in prison doing 2 life sentences and read his book.
And that was a rebroadcast of an interview I did with 2 Black Panthers, Lorenzo Gamboa Irvin and Jonina Abram. You've been listening to Cut to the Chase. My name is Sly Rivers. Join us next week for more fantastic information.